In May 1943, 19 grain ships and oil tankers steamed across the North Atlantic with flight decks welded to their hulls. They carried 70 to 90% of their original cargo, thousands of tons of wheat and aviation fuel desperately needed in Britain, and they operated 4 Fairey Swordfish aircraft apiece, providing continuous air cover for the convoys they sailed with. The mathematics seemed impossible. An escort carrier required £2 million and 18 months to build. A merchant aircraft carrier required £40,000 and 5 months to convert. An escort carrier carried 20 aircraft. A Mack ship carried 4 and still delivered 6,000 tons of grain. By June 1942, U-boats were sinking ships faster than Britain could replace them. 830,000 tons of Allied shipping went to the bottom in 1 month. The mid-Atlantic gap, that 1,000-mile stretch beyond range of land-based aircraft, had become a killing ground where German wolf packs operated with near impunity. Britain needed air cover for every convoy. The Royal Navy had requested 50 escort carriers. American shipyards could deliver perhaps 30 by mid-1943. That left a gap of 20 vessels, 20 convoys sailing without air protection while U-boats waited. The solution appeared in October 1942, sketched on the back of an envelope by Sir James Lithgow, Director of Merchant Shipbuilding. Take grain ships already under construction. Weld a 420-foot flight deck across the cargo holds. Install 2 arrestor wires and a lift. The ship continues carrying grain. The Royal Navy provides 4 Swordfish and 15 aircrew. Total conversion time 5 months. Total cost 1/50th of an escort carrier. The Ministry of Supply objected immediately. Combining merchant and carrier roles was too complicated, they insisted. The fuel systems alone presented insurmountable problems. Oil tankers carried volatile petroleum products. Aircraft required aviation fuel. One spark near either could destroy the vessel. Sir James Lithgow made his counter-argument in pure arithmetic. Grain ships under construction, 12. Additional tankers available for conversion, 9. Total Mack ship capacity, if approved, 21 vessels, sufficient to provide 1 Mack ship per North Atlantic convoy by spring 1943. The War Cabinet approved the program in October 1942. 2 grain carriers, Empire McAlpine and Empire McAndrew, were ordered from shipyards on the Firth of Forth and at Dumbarton. Neither ship had been laid down yet. The Mack ship concept would be built in from the keel up. Empire McAlpine was launched on December 23, 1942. The conversion had taken exactly what Lithgow promised, 5 months. The ship displaced 8,000 tons. Her flight deck measured 420 feet by 62 feet. Below that deck sat 5,000 tons of grain in her holds, a 30% reduction from her designed capacity, but still more cargo than most specialized military vessels carried. The armament reflected her hybrid status: 1 4-inch gun for surface targets, 2 40mm Bofors, and 4 20mm Oerlikon cannons for air defense. 4 Fairey Swordfish torpedo bombers in the hangar below the flight deck, accessed by a lift that could carry aircraft weighing up to 4.5 tons. Her crew totaled 107, roughly double a standard merchant ship of her size. 53 were Merchant Navy sailors who operated the ship, maintained the cargo holds, and kept the engines running. 54 were Royal Navy personnel who handled the aircraft, manned the guns, and controlled the flight operations. Legally, she remained a merchant vessel. Empire McAlpine flew the red ensign, not the white ensign of the Royal Navy. Her master held Merchant Navy rank. But when her Swordfish launched on anti-submarine patrols, she became His Majesty's smallest aircraft carrier. The first operational test came on May 28, 1943. Empire McAlpine joined convoy ONS-9 bound for North America. Her Swordfish began flying patrols, 4 hours each sortie, searching the sea ahead and astern of the convoy for surfaced U-boats. The tactical mathematics were straightforward. A U-boat on the surface could make 17 knots and position itself ahead of a 9-knot convoy. A submerged U-boat made 7 knots and required hours to reach firing position. Simply forcing U-boats underwater transformed them from hunters into targets, struggling to catch convoys that were now faster than they were. Empire McAlpine's Swordfish flew continuously during daylight hours. When weather permitted, they conducted night patrols as well. Each aircraft carried depth charges, radar for detecting surfaced submarines, and radio for calling in escort destroyers to finish what they found. Oil tanker conversions followed different specifications. Tankers couldn't accommodate hangar space. The fuel piping beneath the flight deck made structural modifications too dangerous. The 9 converted tankers of the Rapana class carried 3 Swordfish permanently on deck, exposed to North Atlantic weather that could range from gale-force winds to freezing rain. Collapsible windbreaks provided minimal protection. Maintenance crews worked on aircraft that were never truly dry, never out of salt spray, never free from the corrosive environment of the open sea. Yet the Swordfish continued flying. The operational tempo was relentless. Mac ships sailed with every major North Atlantic convoy from spring 1943 through May 1945. They flew 4,177 sorties, totaling 9,016 flying hours, an average of 13 sorties per convoy voyage. Some voyages produced 0 sorties when weather made flight operations impossible. Others saw continuous operations for days. The U-boat kill statistics tell one story. Mac ship Swordfish never sank a single German submarine on their own. 0 confirmed kills in 2 years of operations. The convoy loss statistics tell another. No convoy escorted by a Mac ship ever lost a vessel to U-boat attack while the Mac ship was present and operational. The explanation requires understanding what victory meant in the Atlantic. Sinking U-boats was merely a tactic. Delivering cargo was the objective. Every ton of wheat that reached Britain, every gallon of fuel oil that arrived in Liverpool represented strategic success, regardless of how many submarines were destroyed in the process. Mac ship Swordfish achieved this through pure presence. U-boats relied on surface running to position themselves ahead of convoys. When Swordfish aircraft appeared, even if they dropped no depth charges, even if they made no attacks, the submarines dove, and once submerged, they were too slow to intercept convoys that had already passed. The economic comparison makes the program's value clear. An escort carrier cost £2 million, carried 20 aircraft, and required a crew of 650. She could not carry commercial cargo. Every sortie she flew came at the expense of cargo space she might have transported. A Mac ship cost £40,000 to convert, carried 4 aircraft, required a crew of 107, and delivered 70 to 90% of her original cargo capacity. The grain ships transported 5,000 to 6,000 tons per voyage. The tankers carried 80% of their pre-conversion petroleum capacity. 19 Mac ships provided continuous convoy escort for 2 years. They delivered approximately 570,000 tons of grain and millions of gallons of fuel, while simultaneously operating aircraft that kept U-boats submerged and away from the convoys they protected. The program's temporary nature was built into its design. When escort carriers became available in sufficient numbers by late 1944, Mac ships began returning to purely commercial service. The conversion worked in reverse: flight decks removed, cargo handling restored, aircraft landed for the last time. In September 1944, 4 Mac ships, Arcavus, Amastra, Ancylus, and Rapana, were taken out of service. The reconversion cost £40,000 per vessel, exactly what the original conversion had cost. The remaining 15 Mac ships continued operations until May 1945, when Germany surrendered and the Atlantic convoy system finally stood down. The Swordfish aircraft made their last operational flights on May 21, 1945. By then, they had flown over 4,000 anti-submarine warfare sorties from Mac ship decks. Their survival record aboard these minimal carriers was extraordinary. Slow, steady approaches to flight decks that were often pitching 60 feet stern to bow and rolling 16 degrees side to side. The pilots were primarily Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve, civilians who learned to fly in wartime and operated from carriers that offered none of the safety margins of purpose-built fleet carriers. They landed obsolete biplanes on wet decks in North Atlantic gales, launched in conditions that kept modern monoplane fighters grounded, and flew patrols that lasted 4 hours over seas where ditching meant death from exposure in minutes. None of them sank U-boats from Mac ships. They kept submarines submerged. They prevented attacks before they developed. They rendered the mid-Atlantic gap, once the most dangerous water in the world, into controlled sea space where convoys crossed unmolested. The final accounting requires no speculation. From May 1943 to May 1945, 19 grain ships and tankers operated as aircraft carriers while simultaneously transporting the cargo Britain needed to survive. They cost 1/50th what purpose-built carriers cost. They carried 1/5 the aircraft. They delivered 100% of the strategic result. By 1946, every Mac ship had returned to commercial service. Some sailed another 25 years, carrying grain from North America to Europe. A few served until the 1970s. None of them sank. None were lost to enemy action. They simply completed their wartime duty and resumed the work they'd been designed for. The innovation vanished with them. Modern navies don't weld flight decks to merchant ships. Purpose-built amphibious assault ships and aircraft carriers perform the roles Mac ships improvised. But the principle remains relevant wherever resources constrain ambition. Sometimes the best carrier is the grain ship with a flight deck welded on. Sometimes adequate aircraft deployed immediately beat perfect aircraft arriving in 18 months. Sometimes the strategic objective is delivering wheat, and the aircraft exist merely to ensure the wheat arrives. The Mac ships proved what wartime economics always proves. Victory goes not to the side with the best weapons, but to the side that can sustain adequate weapons for as long as necessary. In May 1943, Britain needed aircraft over every North Atlantic convoy. She had grain ships. She had flight decks. She had swordfish biplanes that looked ancient but could land on a wet deck in a gale. She welded them together and kept the convoys moving. By any measure that mattered, that was victory enough.